The wider question on the back of this: what should a modern royal family look like? Let's speak with Ashok Kumar, Republican and Professor of Political Economy, Birkbeck University, and Charlie Rae, former royal editor at The Sun. Afternoon to you both. Ashok, why would a republic be better than the current system that we have in this country?
Well, I mean, there's the sort of global question of why these other countries would want a king as the head of state. I mean, lots of polling data suggests that they don't really see any benefits from it. And you're seeing countries, especially in the Caribbean, pushing to break from it. Of course, Barbados being the most famous example of that. But even within this own country, within our own country, I mean, it's kind of the obvious point of we have this kind of cost of living crisis right now. We have 4 million children who are malnourished every day. Millions have been plunged into poverty, having to decide between food and fuel. 800,000 people visited food banks last year. That's 40% increase from the year before. And then the other side, you have someone who we're told we have to celebrate their coronation purely because of the accident of birth, riding in on his golden chariot, sitting on his golden throne, wearing his golden hat, and inheriting 1.2 billion. But we're funding this at 250 million. And that's on top of, the last 2 years where we funded, the running costs, the Jubilee, Philip's death, the Queen's death, now this coronation. So it's upwards of
It's not about him, though, is it, Ashok? I mean, he is the current head of state. He's the current king. This is it's symbolically, it's him. It's the system that we doff our cap to, right? It's the system. So if we didn't have him, we'd have a president there who would also be living in a palace and also taking a big old salary.
The system is completely rotten to the core. First of all, a president, regardless of whether you think they should be paid that much, is democratically elected. Whereas here, we have an outdated, sort of backward, archaic system that is actually telling the public that you have to celebrate deference and subordination. It promotes this idea that some people, because of the accident of birth, because of a bloodline, deserve everything, and other people deserve to be, living malnourished lives on a poverty line. That's what it tells the public. It says this is what you deserve because of the accident of birth.
Charlie Rae, it's a rotten system, Charlie. What do you think?
Well, Asha, the things that you mentioned, the poverty and the cost of living crisis, they're all there whether you have a monarch or not. What I would like to ask you, name one person that you would think would be suitable to be president instead of Charles as king.
That's not how things are decided. They have to put a manifesto together. They then win the public support, and they provide things for the public. Well, right now, we have someone who's because of where they were born, their bloodline, gets billions in public handouts. It's the most parasitic relationship. When we've cut Meals on Wheels, a program that's been around since 1943. It gave 50,000 elderly, vulnerable people enough to eat. It gave them, but 50 million a year was too much for the government to pay. But we're willing to give 250 million for this coronation. It's a joke.
Yeah. It's not a joke, Asha. It's not a joke at all. This is part of our heritage. This is going to be a fantastic occasion. And you don't have to be there. You don't have to enjoy it. You can.
I have to pay for it. I have to pay for it. But
we all have to pay for it. But also, let's not forget the amount of money that that the monarchy brings into this country, 1.7 billion throughout the year, and it's going to bring in an extra 1 billion along with the Eurovision Song Contest. So we get money in because of the monarchy. But you said the way it doesn't work. You cannot mention any person at the moment who would be able to stand in an election who could be the new president of this country, and you're not prepared to answer that question.
I don't believe in anointments. Charlie, I believe that there should be a democratic.
I'm asking you for your opinion as who you think today would be suitable enough to be the new president of your UK. Our UK, sorry.
The only pretext of this is the idea that someone should be selected like this. I believe in a democracy. I think people should run for election, win the public support, and provide for the public. I don't believe that individuals should be choosing like this. And I think that's a legitimate system. What I'm saying is that the idea that they're bringing in money is also completely nonsense. Look, the most visited first place in Europe is the Palace of Versailles. and they chopped the heads of their monarchy in the 1700s. The fact is,
you're not suggesting executions for the king and
I'm providing a historical context. I'm saying for hundreds of years they haven't had a monarchy, and it's the most visited
I'm not sure it is the most visited place in Europe. I think it's a bit of an urban myth that's run away with itself. But either way, I mean, yes, they're a republic. That's the system they have, and for them it works. But of course, is the flaw, Ashok, in your one of the flaws in your argument here, the monarchy system, our monarch, in this case King Charles, isn't proclaiming and legislating and making policy. If he was, then your argument might stand up. But the fact that his role is, in some respects, symbolic, even though it's far more complex than that, that would address your concerns about a lack of democracy.
It's symbolic, but they do have some legislative power. You know, it's not simply that they just exist as symbols of power, but it's also that it tells people, like I said before, it tells people from a very young age, from birth, that there are people that deserve things because of their accent, because of where they were born. We should live in a society that's meritocratic, and also the idea that they're bringing in an enormous amount of money. You know, it's just a fact that, you know, Buckingham Palace isn't even the most visited place. It's like the 70th most visited place. If it was actually opened up, and people could come and see, you know, the art and the historical artifacts that exist within Buckingham Palace, maybe that would bring in more people. I mean, there's very little evidence to suggest that you know, this tourism argument is also a bit of a myth, I think. You know, most people would visit the country regardless of whether they had a king or queen.
Oh, I think that's being a little bit disingenuous there, Ashok. I think the fact that we have a monarchy is one of the key points. I agree with you. Not everybody comes over to see the monarchy, but a lot of people come from other countries. And just on this question of these countries that this poll has taken place in, I have visited all of these 6 countries, the ones that we're talking about that could possibly vote for a republic. And when a member of the royal family has visited these countries, there are thousands of people on the street. Now, the fact that there is a possibility of voting for being a republic does not mean, because the in-depth analysis shows that these realms overwhelmingly want to remain part of the Commonwealth, as the Bahamas have, not as a Commonwealth country, but they want to get the benefits of the Commonwealth. It's a voluntary organisation. No one's going to stop them leaving the Commonwealth. It's a matter for them. And if they want to stay with the Commonwealth and still do trade with the country, Britain, absolutely fine.
Ashok, can I ask, if the whole system that we're discussing here was cost neutral, so yes, a load of money goes in, but it was demonstrably proven that, you know, the money that comes in varying forms, in different ways, was neutral, would that satisfy you?
No, because it's a system that inculcates deference to the powerful. There is a reason why in France, for hundreds of years after they got rid of their monarchy, they change pension reform and people take to the streets. We do reforms in this country and we say, okay, the powerful did it. Let's lay down and take it. There isn't a culture of resistance. There isn't a culture of struggle. There's a system of deference and subordination to the powerful. And that's what we call cultural hegemony. This is what the Italians...
Well, you could call it a hierarchy. But is there not a hierarchy? And I don't mean a hierarchy of the individual, because that wouldn't be right, but a hierarchy in that there is a system, and that system works. And there's nothing... Hierarchy is not a pejorative, right? I mean, there's, you know, families, kids grow up learning a hierarchy. There's nothing wrong with that, surely.
Well, if you're a hierarchy within a parent system, I think that makes sense. But I don't believe that a higher authority figure from a young age should be inculcated in the minds of children. I think, you know, if you look at people right now, polling that's been done between the ages of 16 and 24, 70+% of the public don't want a monarchy, even though every establishment, political establishment, media institution, every single advertisement, if we are telling us, oh no, this is so necessary, you have to celebrate the royals. If we had a system of actual democratic education in public schools and in media, maybe people would be more critical of the fact that we have this totally backward system.
And Charlie, do you think there is now some more persuasive arguments for at least reform of the royal family. I mentioned a couple of times already that obviously, you know, the slimming down thing, Princess Anne alluded to it in that Canadian TV interview, where there already has been a couple of notable figures who've legged it elsewhere for different reasons. It doesn't look quite as it used to. It looks almost like a quartet as we look at the royals today. Can it go further? Should it go further?
Well, it can't go much further than the slimmed-down version. I mean, and when that Princess Anne interview, I mean, she said that it was said at a time when there was a lot more of them around. Well, as you quite rightly just said, you know, two of them have gone their own ways. One's been forced to go their own way. We've had the death of the Queen, we've had the death of Prince Philip, and some of the older members of the royal family who do the occasional job are getting quite old now, and they won't be around. I don't mean dead. I mean, they just won't be capable of doing any more jobs. So we really have got a slimmed-down monarchy as far as we can go. Yes, do I think there could be more reforms? Yeah, I'm sure there will be more reforms. We have to wait and see. We've got a new king. The Queen served on that throne for 70 years, and all the work that she did with the Commonwealth and everything else has passed judgment by a great many people, not just members of the public, but higher up and round the world, as a good thing. We have to wait and see if Charles will be as good. He hasn't got as long as is on the throne.
And Ashok, just a final point. I mean, on Saturday, I know you'll be there with your big Union Jack hat on, watching the whole thing. You know, over the years, I've shared. I understand notionally what you're talking about, but then when I'm thinking back to the last Jubilee, you know, the Queen came down the Thames on a boat, Madness were on the balcony singing. I couldn't have had more of a buzz about... There I am, you know, looking grumpy in the morning thinking, I'm not going to join in with any of this. All of this kicks off, and I couldn't have been more buzzed up if you plugged me into the mains. And I just thought, I can't necessarily quantify it. Intellectually, I couldn't write a dissertation on it, but something about the pomp, the ceremony, the symbolism, what marks your country out, the identity of your country, the history, the theological strands that come from it, and various other things. There's something that you can't necessarily define. I buy that, but you wouldn't really, seriously, Ashok, want to ban it.
Listen, a couple centuries ago, every single person in the world was ruled by a monarch that they thought had a divine right. They were literally related to God. And 90% of the world said, let's get rid of this. This is an outdated, backward system that enshrines privilege in the minds of everyone from the day you're born.
Yeah.
Yes, it feels good, and that's why it was so universally done everywhere throughout history. But people freed themselves from the chains. It's nothing particular to Britain. Britain always goes, oh, it's our tradition. It was the tradition of every country.
Well, it still is in some countries. You know, Cromwell gave it a go, Ashok. Didn't turn out too well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shame. That's all I'm going to say about that.
All right, Ashok, thank you. Ashok Kumar, Republican, in case you hadn't noticed, and Professor of Political Economy, Birkbeck University. The other voice there, our friend Charlie Rae, former royal editor at The Sun, with the other side of that. There were some inaccuracies in this one as well, certainly when it comes to visitations. London is the most visited city in Europe, by the way. Let's get that out there for a start. Buckingham Palace is right up there. Somebody here's just told me that in Scotland, apparently the former royal yacht is one of the biggest tourist attractions in Scotland, where it's birthed there. I would imagine just off the west coast somewhere would be my guess. So yes, there are examples of tourist attractions. The Palace of Versailles is not the most visited. I did go there on a school trip once, but I don't know anybody ever that went. I went to France. Where'd you go? Well, obviously Versailles. Nobody ever said that. Nobody ever said that. You might have happened upon the place. Is it time for a reform, though? If not, I mean, some people will argue, as our man there did, that it's time for an abolition of the royal system. But what would a reform look like? The bit that I think is really hard to kind of justify is this idea that the king will carry on being the head of state in places like Canada, Australia, the Solomon Islands. I mean, that seems a nonsense, and I can understand why those countries would want to change that. But it's interesting, in quite a lot of those other countries, in those territories, it still kind of hangs in the balance. So still like 50% of people go, do you know what, we actually quite like this. So they will have their own reasons as to why they feel it kind of works. What should a modern royal family look like? Riddle me that one if you can. 0344 499 1000. Our lines are open. You're watching Talk TV.